So yeah, out of all the ones I read this month, I only have 2 in, like, copy. So, anyway. Greetings, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Welcome to the AdventuRyn literature. Today is the first monthly wrap-up that I'm doing on this channel. I'm probably going to do the newbie booktuber tag at some point too, but for right now, it's the April wrap-up. So, we're going to start with We Are the Gardeners, written by Joanna Gaines and kids, and illustrated by Juliana Swaney. It's written from the kids' perspective, and it goes into the process of a family starting a garden, and all the things involved with that, and the ecology, and a little bit, it touches on sourcing the materials, not all that much, but a little bit. So, the main problem, I'm not going to go into it all that deep, because these two and The Bad Seed have their own dedicated video on the Amazing Plant Project channel, which I'll link in the iCard and the description if you want to check that out. But the main issue that I had with this is that it reads like a chapter book that's trying to be a picture book, and it could have massively benefited from some editing because it's really wordy and feels like it's going on for longer than it needs to. I'll just say that. So I didn't realize until I was looking up the author and stuff, because that's a thing that I do. But apparently Joanna Gaines is kind of well known in the house flipping sphere, has been on a couple of shows. So I don't know if it kind of suffered from the celebrity author thing, because those tend to not be edited as well. I don't know, but that was a thing that I noticed. So this one is designated as a 4 to 8 age range for that. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. And then we've got A Seed is Sleepy, which it's a kid's book that has botanical watercolor illustrations, and all of them are the actual plant illustrated. You can kind of see the illustration style on We Are the Gardeners, which is very much kind of, you can tell what the plants are, but it's illustrated in a storybook style, which isn't bad, it's just something to be aware of. But for A Seed is Sleepy, it's botanical illustrations. And each of them, I have no idea if this is going to pick up on camera. Apologies if it's just real blurry. But if you look, there's labels for all of them. And every illustration in here has labeling like that. The only real issue that I have with this one, because it goes through different types of seeds and the environments and the dispersal patterns and everything in here very well, and there's a couple of different charts and things, and it would work very nicely for kids, or if you're just not that versed in seeds and how they operate, or if you just want an art reference, because it works for all of it. But I did end up taking a half star off, so I gave this one a 4.5. It's a 5, but it's got some formatting issues. So like here we've got a seed, where is it? A seed is naked, and then it starts over here and then jumps back over to here. So it's readable, you just have to think about where the placement is and stuff, and it can be a bit tricky sometimes. That and all the script, aside from the labels on the plants, is script. So if longhand, cursive, script, whatever you want to call it, is difficult for you to read, this might have some issues for you. But all the names for the plants are in this kind of like typeset font there. Oh yeah. And it was written by Diana Hutz-Aston and illustrated by Sylvia Long. So, and then that's it for the ones that I have physical copies of. So the next one was The Bad Seed, written by Jory John and illustrated by Pete Oswald. And that's the third one in the children's book video that'll be linked all the places. But it's a kid's book that follows a sunflower seed going through life from the sunflower head to the end of the story, going through several kind of traumatic events where there's been some good reviews, and there's people that like seem to really see themselves in the character and identify with the story and stuff, but there's a lot of folks that are arguing that it approaches it really poorly, and I'm kind of in that camp. So throughout the story, the character is describing themselves constantly as a really bad seed, and then at the end it's like, well, he's not so bad, because the character has tried to do better, which in and of itself isn't a bad thing, but it's putting the onus on the child, because in the setting of the story, the main character is essentially a kid who was abandoned and is acting out because they're afraid and in pain and trying to process what's happening. And it's painting the narrative that the kid needs to be the one, or the person going through the events needs to be the one to bring themselves out of it, and therefore will be better afterwards. And it's just kind of I see what they were trying to do, and it works for some people, but like, on top of which, the character was never a bad seed. They were just going through a lot of things, and that was never acknowledged. So I ended up giving it 2 stars because of the art, really. Because the art is rather well done. I've seen a few things that Pete Oswald has done, but the story itself, I don't know. Oh yeah, and Aceta Sleepy was for a 5 to 8 age range, and The Bad Seed was a 4 to 8 age range. So the next one is The Bees. Now, I've already posted a full, in-depth, half-an-hour discussion video on the bees on my other channel, which, again, will be linked all the places. So, I'm going to just do a quick run-through on this one. So, it's written by Elaine Paul. It's well written. It's pretty well done, but I was not prepared mentally to read what I was reading. Now, it's described, and admittedly, if I was more familiar with either of these two, might have been more prepped to go into it, I don't know. But it's described as The Handmaid's Tale meets The Hunger Games, but all the characters are bees, set in a hive. And it's very much a dystopian story. If you go into it expecting a gory dystopian, if you go into it expecting a gory dystopian horror with constant animal-on-animal violence, you'll probably be prepared for it. But you're following one of the bees named Flora 717, going through everything that she does, everything that she goes through. So you're right in the middle of the previously mentioned violence and psychological manipulation. I would not recommend this as an audiobook unless you're comfortable with that sort of genre as an audio format. So overall, while it is well written and it does affect a very visceral response, at least did for me, I gave it 3 stars. Next in the lineup is Jane Goodall's My Life with the Chimpanzees. Now, my experience would probably have been different by a lot if this had been in text versus audio, but we'll get into that in a second. So, the content itself was pretty well done and is very much geared towards a younger audience. The way that she describes primatology and just zoology itself, archaeology, it's very accessible to a child audience. So, very good on that one. And as a positive, she talks about her life and why she wanted to study animals and the relationships that animals have and things. I will say that there were some kind of Eurocentric tones in there with some of the language that was being used. But, how to phrase this? That's kind of how I've seen most anthropological discussions that have come out of a situation where the person was there with missionaries. That's not to say that's a universal at all, not a dig on anybody, but that is a thing that I've noticed. Going through anthropological, ethnographic data, there is the kind of researcher removed from the audience, sort of, or audience, researcher removed from the subject, and I will say that she does address that directly, so it's just, it's a thing to be aware of with the language. So, as a negative, and these are basically entirely for the audio form itself, I will say, having it self-narrated was pretty cool. So, Jane Goodall was doing the narration for the text. However, while I appreciate using certain sound effects to emphasize a story, one does not need to include every sound effect of the story. Point being, at one point there was sounds of tires on asphalt because the ambulance was taking someone to the hospital, or the sound of a dog chewing rawhide when given a treat at some point, or horns of some kind. I think it was a car horn or some kind of loud something to immerse the listener in the narrative. Having ambient sounds works, especially for the parts where she's talking about field work, because you can have recordings from the forest that you're working in as a backdrop to the story about the forest that you're working in. So you've got birds, you've got monkey calls, it works. Or there's like maybe ambient rain or something, as long as it's not infringing on the narrative. And it sounded like, at least, the vocal audio was recorded and then periodically cut off. A sound effect was inserted, and then like a couple seconds after that was done, the audio came up again, which wouldn't be so bad every once in a while, but there were whole sections in there that it was every 2 sentences. And it's also one of those that if you have any auditory triggers, I would not recommend this at all. So, something to keep in mind when you're working with books and things like that. So, yeah, also a note, if you're making an audiobook, something to keep in mind. So overall, I ended up giving it 3 stars. And then the last 2, because there's a few that are in progress, but I'm going to be talking about those in the next video that will be filmed right after I wrap for this and let the camera sit for a bit because it's trying to overheat. So, but that one's going to be the TBR for May, including the books that I'm planning to read for the Asian Readathon. That one would be going up a couple of days after this one, so we'll see. Anyway, figure it out. So, the next one that I read in April was The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. It's a debut novel. I ended up reading it on the audiobook format, and I don't know if it's because this is legitimately the first audiobook that I ever read as an audiobook, but there was just something odd about the voice acting, especially because at one point there were 3 voice actors, and in the chapters that overlapped, they didn't like separate it out so that one character was talking to another character that also has their own voice actor. So like that voice would be talking. It was just each chapter was a particular viewpoint. So whoever's view that was on the rest of the story would be the one voicing all the characters. So you had this like interesting disconnect between interpretations of what that voice is, which I read it at the start of April, and at that point it was really annoying. Now it's kind of funny, so it works. I don't know. It's an interesting set, I'll say that. But I'm working on a non-spoilery review to put on the other channel. When that's completed, I'll put a link to it in the description down below. It'll be after this goes up, but you know, there we go. But the story follows Nella, who's in the 1790s, and Caroline, who's present day, going through certain trials and betrayal and things of that nature. But there's some good friendship relationships, lots of plants mentioned and used in both timelines. There's some fantasy elements, like magical realism, that sort of thing. Overall, I gave it 3 stars. It's well done. There's some pacing sort of issues, but I'll get into that more in the other one. And then the last one for the month was crap taxidermy. So, if you've been on my Bookstagram, which is an odd word to say, let me just get that out there, which I'll link in the description and all of that, but it's written by Katsu, and it's basically a book format of the author's blog entitled Crappy Taxidermy, which, from what I've seen at least, looks like it's people sending in images of taxidermied animals from around the world that are either done really bad or not in the best of conditions and weren't preserved properly, or were positioned in interestingly artistic ways, like, you know, mice having a card game, that sort of thing. It got a few chuckles out of me. But yeah, ended up giving that one 3 stars for just, it is what it is. It doesn't try and take itself too seriously. It's just, it is a picture book with some like, ha, look at this thing. So, there's that. Yeah. So, that's it for this one. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, including the ones that are still in process, there'd be 11 on the TBR for May? I don't know. I don't know about that. We'll see. So anyway, I will get into that in a couple of minutes and film that, and it'll go up after this does. So, that being said, all my social media links and everything are listed in the description down below. I do Twitch streams on Mondays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. PST or GMT -8. And Mondays we go over... Where did I put it? It's literally under the computer. Okay, one sec. So yeah, this is the stack of things in process right now. But we're currently reading Braiding Sweetgrass in the Botany Book Club that's Mondays on Twitch. So if you want to pop by there, you don't have to read it along with us, but it's a fun read and it's very, very well done. Would highly recommend this. So, it talks about plants and plant knowledge and the relationship between humans and their environment from an indigenous perspective. So, yeah. Just a thank you to Rob on Patreon and my Twitch subscribers for supporting what I do. And yeah, that's about it. So yeah, hit the subscribe button down below and the bell icon next to it to be notified when I upload stuff. And I will see y'all later. Have a good one, everybody. Bye now. And I'm trying to do this and have the thing go fast enough that the camera doesn't decide that it's going to overheat and die. So, seriously, where is it?